Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei is the son of the Dragon King? Acnologia Part 3. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the DragonKingNatsu for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Issei was at home relaxing when he received a note from Rias via magic circle. All the message said was to meet him at some distant house and that she'd explain the rest when he got there. Though he liked the occult research club for the most part, he only was beginning to discover that devils didn't reveal all their cards immediately, even when said devil was a friend. For her to think that he'd actually deem it worthy to come without knowing why was quite brazen, as if her whims were more important than whatever he was doing. That said, all he was doing was gaming on his computer, so he obviously decided to go. But he didn't have to be happy about it. Asia, who he had gone to visit once already just to say hi, would never have demanded something from him like that. She was such a considerate friend, and he couldn't believe that he'd found the exact type of person Gilderts claimed he'd die to protect. Rias, while she was sort of his friend too, was different from Kaneko and Asia in that regard. He wouldn't die from Yurei Amarkates either, though he did care for the two almost as much as Kaneko. What's got you so annoyed? Ah, Drake, always nosing about his nephew's business. If anything, it had just gotten worse now that the teen hung out with devils. Do you need to know everything about my life? He nodded and sat down on the other side of the room. Those devils again, huh? He got his answer from Issei's reaction. But you just sent me a message telling her to meet her peerage a couple miles from town. The Welsh dragon crossed his arms. Let me guess, she didn't say why. Listen partner, I wouldn't worry too much. When it comes down to it, you'd probably go anyway, regardless of the reason, so just relax. Says the dragon, who hardly cared about anything other than drinking with his buddy. If it's something boring, you're gonna get it. No, I won't, his uncle shot back. True enough, Issei was awful at giving him the cold shoulder. Fine. At least he knew when he was beat. I'm leaving now. Drake rolled his eyes as Issei shut the door behind him. That left Drake alone with a single prevalent thought. For such a strange upbringing, Issei sure was fantastic at acting like a normal teenager. Flying there at near top speed took him barely any time at all, much less than a minute. In fact, most of it was spent figuring out where the hell Rias wanted them to meet up for whatever they were doing. Thankfully, he remembered Kaneko's unique scent well enough to find the rest of the club. Rias, Akeno, Yudo, and Kaneko were all standing in front of an old house situated in a forest, a surprisingly secluded and remote location in close proximity to the city. The king herself had a small smile, as if she was relieved that Issei had come. There you are, Ice-kun. You got here quickly, it seems. It had been about 5 minutes since he got her message. Another time, he would have felt like he kept her waiting, but now he thought it would make for some form of retribution. Had a little trouble finding the place, he bit out, landing in front of them and putting away his wings. The president seemed to understand. I apologize if it was on such short notice. We had only just received this mission from the Archduke, and I trusted you were capable enough to find us. Well, she wasn't wrong with the last bit. She's just spinning it. He may be a bit dense, but he could often see the undertones behind praise. That was basically the one way Acnologia had raised him, complimenting him in a manner that got him to do something else. Either way, I guess it wasn't too hard to get here. Now, Rias began in her business-like attitude. I bet you're wondering what we called you here for. Rumors were recently confirmed about a stray devil holed up in this house who lures humans inside and then eats them. That brought back unpleasant memories that he'd preferred to leave untouched. Although Issei had been killed before, eating the bodies of sentient beings went a little beyond his childhood mental conditioning. Even his father considered it gross. Rias seemed to remember something, prompting sympathy. Yes, you encountered one a lot like this before, and I'm sure the memories are less than enjoyable. All stray devils care about is themselves, having killed their own masters to fulfill their desires of freedom. Issei, though he cared none for the type of stray he'd seen, could imagine why they would decide on freedom over subservience. In fact, in a dire situation, Issei himself would have probably done a similar thing, although, freedom for a dragon is far more sacred than for a human, and it is also a matter of pride. These monsters are pure evil, Kiba commented. They don't care about anything other than their own selfish desires, and that always ends in ugliness. Akeno chuckled in her signature, frightening way. It shouldn't be too hard to find the beast and kill it. And having you around might make it more fun. Akeno's sadism was quick to terrify, regardless of power difference. This will be a good chance to take a close look at how devils fight. So I'm doing nothing? Issei complained. He loved a good fight. Both Akeno and Rias giggled, Kiba smirking. Rias, though, was the one to supply what they were all thinking. I don't think it'd be much of a challenge for you, Ice-kun. Oh man, this was really no fun. He was under the impression that devils could find tough opponents far easier than he could otherwise at a human school. It wasn't like Drake was going to encourage him to get his ass whooped by someone stronger just so he could have a good time, so asking his uncle was out of the question. Beyond that, he never did have much initiative and he had no idea how to get to the underworld on his own. That only left him with destroying something and waiting until someone powerful notices the mess, and that was stupid, risky, and dangerous. Not to mention that it would piss Drake off, and the dragon doesn't get mad at him often. So, that meant he was stuck spectating. Dang. Akeno was undeterred. But Issei, wouldn't you just love to watch me fight? Hands off, Akeno, Ria's jaded command barely made the queen refrain from suggestively rubbing Issei's cheek. Thanks for the save, but you, Issei sighed in relief. I've only seen Kiba's skills, so I guess I can watch the rest of you. Let's begin. Kaneko was always there to keep everyone on track with her blunt comments. Right, Ria's agreed. They opened the large doors to a vast first floor. Who designs a house like this? Issei wondered as they wandered through the darkness. To him it felt like wandering, but he was sure that the devils could see fine, as that was the only one of the 5 senses that he knew they were more adept in. Then again, he figured he could track the target using his acute sense of smell, but the entire place smelled so nasty that he practically refrained from breathing in. Like the last encounter with a stray, the stench of rotting flesh permeated the air, and a sour tang made him want to heave up his lunch. Sometimes, having an impeccable sense of smell could backfire, and all dragons hated that fact. While it wasn't a true vulnerability in an all-out fight, it was still a weakness, and no dragon was a fan of weakness. As you may know, the peerage system is based on chess. Chess, Issei hummed, trying to remember the game. Didn't my father play chess? He thought aloud. Kiba's eyes widened at the comment. I never knew dragons played chess. Oh, they don't, Issei affirmed. He was talking about his human father, who was near a chessboard in all Issei's memories of him. None of them got to pose the question on their minds when suddenly a booming voice interrupted them. I can smell something disgusting. But I can also smell something delicious. Is it sweet? Or is it sour? There was an obscene chuckle following that. Lady, you smell awful. Issei shouted back, plugging his nose the closer the stray devil got. She didn't smell anything close to a normal devil, that's for sure. Instead, it was a gut-wrenching mix of rotting corpses, a type of horrid monster, and something sickly sweet. If Riaz didn't get this over with quickly, he was going to kill this nasty stray and get the hell out. Riaz ignored both of them. Stray devil visor, you have abandoned your master and ran away to fulfill the lustful wants and desires that have consumed you. In the name of the Marquis of Gremory, I will bring you to justice. Issei couldn't help but think that she made her speech all flowery and righteous just for him. In his opinion, binding someone to servitude was a little much, even when the servant was willing. Hunting down those who didn't agree didn't sit right with him, but if they were all like this visor monstrosity, then he could easily see why they needed to be dealt with. As the stray stepped into Issei's vision, he learned that her terrible smell did little to account for how disfigured her body was. Her lower body, like that of a quadruped giant animal, had a mouth with teeth in it. Her upper body appeared human, and she was completely dead. In fact, he thought this one was freakier than the one from 2 years ago, despite the lack of threats to eat him. Oh please, you little slut. Visor rubbed her large dot, you're just jealous your will never be as luscious as these. This is your final warning, go back to your master now. Issei liked that Riaz was assertive, it was a quality he valued. Wow, his mind was wandering a ton today, which was probably better than focusing on the rancid smell. Issei faced Kiba. Please tell me they aren't all like this. The blonde shrugged. They certainly aren't pleasant. Great, just great. Visor cackled madly as magic circled appeared in front of her, and her grew hard. This is so sad, Issei shivered. His disgust only grew worse when the magic circles spun and she fired a yellow laser from them, directly at the group. He groaned as the nasty stuff hit him, melting his shirt in places. He may have been fine standing there, but the rest dodged, and the shots that missed hit the wall and corroded through the entire thing. Now I'm gonna smell bad for the rest of the day. Issei complained. But you. He yelled. You're okay, Issei? The Redeed asked. Of course you are, how silly of me. She nodded at Kiba, who promptly shot forwards at the stray, drawing his sword. As you know, Kiba's my knight, so his attribute from the evil piece is speed. The blonde was quick and agile, effortlessly slashing off the stray's upper 2 arms. Thankfully, Issei wasn't near the blood that gushed from Visor because he wanted to stay as far away from this terrible porno as possible. Kaneko's my rook, Riaz added as the stray charged her, clamping her lower mouth around the cat-like girl. Her attribute is simple, she has greatly enhanced strength. Said girl pushed the mouth open, betraying no emotion, not even disgust. See you on the flip side. All it took was a grab and a short movement to smash the stray into the ground, sending dust flying everywhere. Always say gushed. small and with impressive physical strength. She's even cuter now. The stray was clearly in pain, and it brought the dragon a small amount of joy. He didn't enjoy killing much anymore, but this was a well-deserved punishment, and he wasn't going to cry over trash being thrown out. Not even Drake would tell him to spare this monster. Akeno, Rias prompted. The third-year student stepped forward, her grin suggesting she was far more thrilled than Issei. My turn, how exciting. I bet you love this, Issei-kun. Drop it, Akeno, the Gremory commanded, sighing. Out of the corner of his eye, Issei spotted one of the severed arms twitching. The moment it shot at Rias, he spat some magic at it, a watered-down form of his roar, disintegrating the limb mid-air. Thanks, Ice-kun. No prob, the dragon replied, glad he got to destroy some advisor, no matter how small a piece. He really didn't like these strays. Rias regained her composure after seeming a little shaken. Akeno's my queen, holding the traits of all the other pieces. Akeno stood in front of the stray. I've got news for you, you're not the only one who likes to play rough, so let's have some fun. Yellow lightning cackled at her fingertips as she raised her hands towards Visor. Akeno is called the Thunder Priestess for her skill in magic. Oh, another mage, then. That interested Issei. What's more? This violence, Akeno at her hand as Visor was electrocuted, wails of pain echoing through the room. It's making me so hot. She loves S&M, Rias finished. Ah. The queen was having a blast. Is this as good for you as it is for me? It's official, Issei mumbled. This world makes no sense. He could not believe that Akeno was enjoying this so much. Even though there was an enormous gap in power between the two, she could still make him shudder. That's enough, Akeno. After some half-hearted protest, the queen let the lightning die down, while the room filled with the smell of singed devil. Rias was now only a few feet in front of the fallen Visor's head. Any last words? Go to hell, the defeated stray croaked out. Alright then, let's end this. A red magic circle bearing the crest of Gremory appeared before her. Game over. Black and red magic leaped towards the devil, swallowing her whole and exploding in a shower of energy. When the show died down, there was literally nothing where Visor used to be. That's a lot like one of my moves, Issei considered idly. At least Rias had magic that was stronger than most human mages, including those in guilds. Still, seeing her use a magic similar to his hardly made up for subjecting him to this horrible place. You know, I really didn't get to see your team's skills at all. Rias smiled. Oh Ice-kun, I can't reveal everything to you. I did think the stray would put up more of a fight, however. Yeah, well next time just fight me. You don't need to hold anything back. Maybe he couldn't win in human form, seeing how he wasn't too great at fighting in it, but he could definitely crush them in his hybrid state. As a full dragon, well, it wouldn't even be classified as a fight. Akeno giggled, I'd love to have some fun with you. Maybe later, Akeno, Rias interrupted. Let's head home. That didn't sound like a bad idea. Issei had a game to get back to. He didn't go back to the occult research club for a few more days. At first, he had gone to Kendo, much to the pleasure of Murayama and Caddis, but something about that club wasn't satisfying. After he had gotten a taste of the world beneath the one he lived in, pretending to be human and hiding his power grew far less entertaining. The times he did go to the club, he won every fight effortlessly, shocking all of his clubmates. Murayama stood no chance against him when Issei's immense power leaked into his spar, allowing him to win without purely relying on human strength and skill. He was growing restless, and he knew of only one person who had begun to accept him for who he was, Asia. One afternoon, he went to the church but couldn't find Asia, so he settled with training his magic and meditating for a few hours. Acnologia had taught him the skill of steadying the mind and body, because chaos dragon magic could end up controlling the user if they weren't careful. In times of extreme emotion, it could prompt truly devastating actions with no forethought of the consequences. Meditating also helped to increase the power of the magic, since some of its power lies within its close connection to what was known as the One Magic, where all abilities native to Earthland stemmed from. Issei was now able to release his pent-up energy without worry or fear that any of the factions would bother him, thanks to Rias and her peerage. Although he hadn't seen them at all recently, being allied with them was still a great help. It made him wonder if Tannen had some grounds in believing that joining a faction was actually beneficial to their race. Perhaps, he considered as he meditated, he was being too hard on Rias. Uncle wouldn't want me to make a big deal out of something so small. All she wanted was to help me get to know her servants better. A part of him wanted to demonstrate to Rias that she could never control him, but that part was dwindling as he accepted her reasoning. After the ordeal with Raynor, he had some trouble with trusting that someone taking an interest in him wasn't just going to manipulate them for their own gain. Drake, a dragon well versed in this, had told him that Rias wasn't likely to betray him, so he should probably forgive her. He wasn't going to be his father, and he wasn't going to be an ass either. That settled, he stood up, shifting back into human form. I'm heading out. Alright partner. I'll be gone until tomorrow. Tomorrow? What, was the old dragon hanging out with his buddy again? And, if so, why hadn't he left already? It was well past 8 p.m. Issei knew better than to probe deeper into what his uncle did in his free time and took off, flying to the old school building. When he arrived, he knocked on the door, noticing it was deathly quiet. Strangely, although he was officially in their club, he still felt out of place enough that he had to knock first. "Come in," he heard from Riaz. She didn't sound happy, not at all. Not knowing what to expect, he entered. What did he just walk in on? Riaz was Buck, laying on an equally Kaneko, the two pressed together on the couch in a very, very suggestive manner. Ria's perky were squished against Kaneko's, and the younger girl seemed to be they in the middle of something. Kiba wasn't looking, instead staring at a wall, and Akeno seemed a little too interested in her master's actions. "What the hell?" Issei exclaimed, shutting the door immediately, leaving him back in the hallway. Sure, he'd grown up learning that dragons were upfront about, but this took upfront to a whole new level. As he shut his eyes and tried not to think too hard about what happened, he heard the door open, and he recognized the person that came out as Kiba. Issei opened his eyes and noticed Kiba was somewhat amused, the blonde sighing and placing his hand on the dragon's shoulder. "It's not what it looks like, Issei-san." "How?" Issei mumbled, sure his perceptions of an innocent catgirl and kind club president were ruined. "Devils like Butchu can use skinship to heal others. Kaneko was injured during one of her jobs, and it was only natural that Butchu offered to help. That was an erotic ability." Kiba's face went back to that resolute cold expression he had on earlier. Kaneko was attacked by a stray exorcist, and he shot her through the stomach. Issei was about to comment, but he didn't want to anger Kiba. Though the two had their differences, and Issei was a bit jealous at the blonde's princely looks, he knew when to back off. Clearly, Kiba had some type of past experience with an exorcist or something along those lines. While he wasn't sure what exactly made a stray exorcist a stray, he could take a guess and say it wasn't anything good. Eventually, he figured he had to say something, or Kiba would be even more absorbed in his internal anger. "Is she alright?" The knight nodded. "You know, you can ask her yourself." Issei was sure he was mocking his reaction from earlier, but his tone and expression left no hint as to whether that was true. "I will." Issei humphed, immediately throwing the door open. He slammed it behind him, leaving a confused Kiba. The sight wasn't as shocking the second time around, especially when he knew that they weren't screwing on the couch. Not even Drake did that when he was around, and that dragon had no shame around women. That didn't mean he wasn't slightly aroused at the sight, because he was. It was hard not to be when beautiful females were pressed up against each other, regardless of the reason. He hoped he wasn't giving that fact away, though, because he had some dignity. Perverted was another deadpan. "My name, Akeno," giggled. "It seems that even our dragon has his weaknesses." "Damn it, Kaneko-chan." Issei cried. "You're both on the couch, how can I not look?" He even tried closing his eyes, but he didn't want to make this any more awkward than it already was. Riaz chuckled, sitting up next to Kaneko, who covered her with her arms. He does have a fair point. After all, Ice isn't as used to the ways devils do things. So it was just Ice now, huh? He wasn't too sure if that was a more or less familiar address than Ice-kun. He'd have to ask one of the kendo girls. "Kiba explained it to me, okay," he justified it. "I just want to know what happened. Was it so hard for people to tell him straight up what was going on? Everyone in this damn world loved beating around the bush and hiding everything." The club president didn't seem offended at the annoyed command. She wasn't one to be easily bothered by words. Kaneko would be better equipped than I to explain what happened. "No, I'd rather not." Issei stuck his tongue out at her. "Is it too many words, Kaneko-chan?" Before he could laugh humiliatingly at his own joke, he controlled himself. "Well then," the Redeed smiled, amused. "I guess I have to fill you in instead." Man, Issei really did not get these people at all. The client that summoned Kaneko was murdered, and a stray exorcist had set a trap for the next unsuspecting devil. The bastard injured her, and I will never forgive him for it. She was really serious about the safety of her peerage, another oddity of the Gremory house. Most devils could care less about the condition of their servants, but Ria's promise just then was cold and serious. It was obvious to Issei that she wasn't playing around. The exorcist is Fried Selzen, a priest at the local church. The local church? Issei interrupted. That was where Asia was staying. She couldn't have anything to do with this, right? He banished the thought immediately, knowing that the nun could never harm a living being. Not for any reason, even her life. "Yes, it appears so," Ria sighed. The fallen who had taken up residence at the church were proving to be a petulant nuisance. Kaneko kept fighting, despite the injury. After all, her trait as a rook is durability, and you know just how strong her will is. The priest was about to get in another hit when someone stopped him. "What do you mean stopped him?" Issei wondered. That warranted a nonchalant response. A blonde girl pleaded with him not to hurt her. Kaneko nodded. She was a nun. Asia, I think. Asia? Issei stammered. Why was Asia with that bastard? He clenched his fist until a few drops of blood dripped from it. She may have stopped Freed from injuring Kaneko further, but that didn't exempt her from the murder earlier. Had even Asia, the most honest of souls he'd ever met, lied to him? Was he so stupid to succumb to another deception? How could he be so pathetic? Relax, Issei, Riaz insisted. They all nearly jumped when they heard a snarl, reminding them that Issei was by no means human. No. I refuse to believe that such a good person would be involved in murdering anyone. This wasn't the Issei Haidu they'd all come to know, this was the son of Acnologia. Riaz wasn't scared, though, not of someone she had feelings for. You know her then? The crimson-haired king concluded. When I arrived, she seemed ridden with guilt, and I remember her being called a newbie. It's likely that she wasn't a willing participant. Kaneko added on, Freed nearly raped her. That might not have been the best reassuring comment. Raped her, Issei muttered darkly. No matter what, he would protect her. It was selfish, he knew that. There would never be another person like Asia that enabled him to forget about who he was. When he was with her he didn't have to worry about blending in or pretending to have the qualities Gilderts tried to instill in him. He could be honest, truthful, for the first time in his life. And she was so innocent and pure, qualities that attracted him as a dragon, and he'd be damned before someone got that chance to ruin that. Excuse me, I have some business to take care of. Wait, Issei, please. The club president stood up, her jiggling. What, Riaz? She shivered at the direct address, his slitted icy eyes gazing straight through her. She ran up and hugged him. Don't do anything rash. Relations between the devils and the church are already tense enough, and no matter how strong you are, I don't want you caught up in our mess. Please. Devil cares for me? The thought ran through his head almost subconsciously, and he felt his cold expression soften somewhat. I'll try, but no promises. I'll teach them that dragons aren't as forgiving as other races. Thank you, Riaz replied, back in her businesslike Gremory demeanor. Without another word, Issei turned tail and shut the door behind him, leaving the peerage in awkward silence. Kaneko was quick to put on some clothes, deciding that she had enough of being in front of everyone. Kiba's cool air hadn't changed for the entire conversation. It isn't like you to let a friend walk into trouble, Akeno pointed out. Riaz crossed her arms. No, it's not. But there isn't much that can stop someone like Ice, not when he has his mind up. If he was going to find Asia at the church and deal with the stray exorcist personally, all she could do was wish him luck. Sincerely, though, she hoped he wouldn't be injured or deemed a threat by any higher-ups. She didn't know if she had the political influence to protect him without him being a peerage member. I suppose the lightning priestess relented. How cute of Issei-kun to fit a stereotype about dragons. She chuckled, imagining some very wry roleplay scenes for the bedroom. And what is that? Akeno edged her lips at the possibility. They can't resist innocent little maidens. The thought that he might be seen never even crossed his mind. What a silly thing that would be to worry about when Asia was in danger. He had to find her and save her from that Freed bastard, and he didn't give a damn if people saw his hybrid form. He didn't need to hide, that was something that was for the weak. Or weak-willed, like his uncle, no matter how justified Drake was in keeping his identity a secret. That was why he was currently flying over Kuo, using his sharp predatory eyesight to scour the ground for any sight of the blonde nun, slowly making his way to the old church. I have to find her. He couldn't even think about the possible connection between Asia and Freed, much less the fallen. Surely, that bitch Rainer had some involvement if the exorcist was a so-called stray. His pupil-less pure wide eyes spotted a streak of blood on the hill by the church. That's her. With a swift beat of his wings, he changed direction, aiming straight at Asia. Just before he hit the ground, he pulled up and slowed his momentum to a standstill. Asia barely had time to recognize the threatening dragon in front of her before strong arms wrapped around her body and pulled her into a hug. She would have yelped, screamed, or struggled, but something about the embrace was gentle, much more so than one would expect from a burly dragon. Are you okay, Asia? He released her from his grasp, checking her over to make sure nothing smelled or looked amiss. The blonde tilted her head. Issei-san. Oh, right, sorry. I forgot you wouldn't recognize me like this. In a gesture that hardly fit his intimidating looks, he rubbed the back of his head. I did tell you to call me Issei. Asia brought him back into the hug, much to his surprise. I knew it was you. I think you look really nice as a dragon. She placed her hands together and smiled. Oh, he blushed, she was just saying that. He knew that his appearance was far more terrifying than nice. That was just the type of person Asia was, the one who accepted him regardless of what he thought he deserved. I heard about Freed from the devils and had to make sure you're alright. I'm okay, really. Her depressed tone betrayed that assurance. Issei growled fiercely, startling Asia a little. You can't be treated like that. I know you aren't involved with the stuff he is. You can't have killed someone. You're nothing like me. She placed a hand on Issei's arm. He didn't do anything, and I would never take another's life from them. That was a relief. There was no way she was lying, not with that sincere tone. He wasn't even sure she could lie. Let's go. He looked up at the church and scowled. I want to get away from this place. Okay. She nodded enthusiastically. It's such a beautiful afternoon, so I was going to spend it at the park. The park? That was where Rainer had revealed her betrayal. Did he want to go back there? You can't live your life in the past, partner. Braig's words resonated right then. His uncle was right, he just had to move on like he was trying to do with Acnologia. Water under the bridge. That sounds fun. Say, Asia, you haven't ever gone flying, have you? Flying? She repeated, looking at Issei's two feathered wings. Issei chuckled, grabbing her tightly. Hold on. With that, he hurled himself into the air, snapping the wings out. In one huge stroke, he had blown leaves and debris 20 feet from them, then they shot upwards. H. Asia yelped over the wind, clutching her shawl, despite the fact that it was already pressed tightly to the dragon's .Issei. The yelling devolved into laughter when Issei craned his neck to grin at her. To anyone else, all those sharp teeth would have meant danger, but Asia knew he was teasing her. The wind whipped through the air, and Asia had an amazing view of the whole city. This is so cool, she realized, giggling a little at her friend's antics. Her stomach, though, went through a loop when Issei showed off, doing some backflips and mock dives. By the time Issei slowed down, her hair was messy and windswept, and the feeling of nausea was barely overshadowed by the thrill of it all. When he touched down on solid ground and let her go, she stumbled for a few steps before crashing down, landing on her side. Oops. Issei was busy laughing at her, a sort of deep rumble, and she couldn't help but join in. I should have told you you'd get a little dizzy. After figuring that standing in a place as public as a park while a dragon was a bad idea, a blue glow quickly covered him. In seconds, he was back to the same boring-looking brown-haired teen that Asia had met. She smiled, sticking her tongue out. Grabbing Issei's offered hand, she pulled herself back onto her feet. Only to stumble again. This time, however, Issei steadied her. So, how'd you like it? That was really fun, Issei. Asia complimented. I don't know if I want to go again, though. Yeah, I may have done too many loops, he admitted. That was the first time he'd ever had a passenger, so he went kind of overboard. For someone like Asia, the typical pride dragons, Issei included, felt didn't seem all that important. They had fun, and that was what mattered. Asia shuffled her feet a little. Issei. He adjusted his Kuo Academy uniform, making sure nothing was out of place. Her stomach roared loudly. I'm hungry. Luckily, the park had tons of restaurants lining the touristy area. Back at Issei's favorite of those food joints, the one that served juicy American burgers, the two had ordered a late lunch. Though Issei had already eaten, dragons could shove down a ton of food, even when they didn't technically have to eat at all. He could survive on the natural disorder of the world, but what fun was that when he could eat actual food? When the waitress passed each of them their greasy hamburger, he grinned and eagerly took a bite. Asia, however, stared blankly at it. What's wrong? She blushed furiously. I've never eaten one of these before. Never. Really? They even sold these in Fiori, and she'd never even tried one. He wasn't sure whether to be shocked or sympathetic. Okay then, hamburger 101. Issei chomped down on his burger. Wash it like this. Like that. You're sure? Issei swallowed, a smile on his face. Trust me, there's no better way. She stared at her own tray like one would approach a puzzle. Well, if that's the way you're supposed to do it carefully, she slowly raised it to her lips and took a tiny bite. Wow, this is really yummy. Yeah, hamburgers are much better than the stuff dragons typically eat, he admitted. Say, since you were going to walk around in the park anyways, what do you think about hanging out? I could show you around town. With a nod, she replied, that sounds fun. He knew he had to ask at some point what was bothering her. Through her joyful and perky personality, Issei always caught glimpses of sorrow and loss. He could take a guess at the culprit, but he wasn't going to ruin the mood. No, as long as Asia was with him instead of at the church, there was no reason to broach the topic. She most certainly didn't pry into his complicated background, so he would return the favor. They spent a couple hours in the arcade. On second thought, Issei knew it was because he just had to beat one of their games, but at the time both were having a great time. Although the arcade had a different setup than all the games he played, he was happy to find that his useless obsession that he wasted time on at home impressed Asia. He was even able to win her a cute stuffed animal. Surprisingly, Asia wasn't bad at video games at all, despite the fact she'd never seen them before. Unfortunately, they didn't do much else, since they only had the afternoon. Now, after that, they were finishing that walk through the park while Issei was telling her about his school. There are these two complete pervs, right, that keep peeking in on the kendo club. That doesn't sound very nice, Asia commented. Issei nodded sagely. Nope, they're a bit weird. Anyways, the two club leaders, Murayama and Katis, always get really mad. It takes like 10 minutes of arguing with them just to keep those weirdos out of the nurse's office, and by then, they're gone. He wasn't a huge fan of constantly watching the two perverts get beat up, so he tried to help them out in the hopes that they'd take a hint and try to be more respectful. Wow, it must be interesting to go to such a lively school. Trust me, that's not the most lively part of it. The school's basically run by devils, everyone on the student council is one. Oh, don't worry. I know you're a member of the church and all, but these guys don't run around stealing souls and whatnot. They're decent for the most part. Asia didn't seem surprised. I know. I met one of them the other day. She didn't seem bad. There it was again, that melancholy undertone. The one you saved was Kaneko-chan, and she's very grateful. If grateful meant she actually said something kind, then yes, she was grateful. I was worried when I heard about you from her and Ria's. That was why I had to check up on you. So that's how you knew, Asia said. Well, I'm glad you found me. I had a fun time today. She smiled, squeezing the stuffed animal Issei's won for her. He couldn't help but remember Rainer's naughty smirk. See, Issei-kun, this date wasn't so bad after all. Stupid bird, he taunted inwardly. I didn't need a date or a club to enjoy myself. Yeah, I haven't had that much fun in a long time. Not since his childhood, when the definition of the word was warped and twisted to mean something it never should. I'm not going to let you go back to the church. We have a spare bedroom at my house you can stay in. Asia seemed a little flustered at the straightforward command. I can't, she sighed, her bright green eyes gazing off into the distance. Really, I would, but I owe Rainer-sama my life. She sat down on a bench overlooking a small pond, as if she suddenly lost the strength to keep on standing. Did he hear that right? Rainer-sama. The nun confirmed it with a downcast nod. When I was a baby, I was abandoned by my real parents. She launched into the tale of her life. After being left in front of the church, she was taken in by some kind nuns who raised her. One day, when she was 8, a sick puppy had wandered in. Desperately, she prayed to God to save it, and there was a miracle. She had discovered her ability to heal then, and she was treated as a saint for taking care of men and women that would visit from around the world for her power. The idea that I could help so many people made me so happy, she reminisced. I finally felt like I had a purpose. But it wasn't meant to be. She had come across an injured man and healed him. Only, he wasn't a man, but a devil, so she was cast out of the church and shunned for her wicked power. They called her a witch and a heretic and never let her back into the house of God. So, Issei summarized, Rainer found you. Yes, she saved me from a lonely and hopeless life, but I'll never forget who I am. I say my prayers and try my best to live a good life. They do such horrible things, and I know the suffering must be a test of my faith. She looked wistfully off past the reflective pond. If I can overcome these trials, I know that someday my hopes and dreams will come true. What are your dreams? To make lifelong friends and to get to know them very well. To do lots of cool things and to be able to have fun together. It's kind of silly. Her warm smile returned. Like when we went flying. It was so much fun. So, her ideals were like Gilbert's then. Rainer won't help you reach those dreams. She'll use you then throw you away like she tried with me. He owed Asia that story at least. When I first came to Kuo with my uncle, I had never really lived in the human world before. Dragons don't manipulate or trick, so when I met Rainer and she claimed she just wanted to get to know me, I believed her. After I refused her offer to join her faction, she tried to kill me. Asia seemed startled by that, even though she probably already knew the trainer could kill. Issei decided that he'd said enough about that. I'm your friend, right? Absolutely. He faced her, determination written in every part of his features. Then I won't let you go back to the fallen angels and that asshole exorcist. They don't deserve to be near someone as pure as you. If they touch you I'll kill them. But that's not right Issei, Asia replied weakly. She knew Issei wouldn't go out of his way to do anything evil, but Issei's proclamation was still a little haunting. Someone was laughing, a feminine, sardonic sound. How ironic. Rainer? Issei growled. It couldn't be. Why did this worthless bird have to ruin such a nice afternoon? She was standing over the water, the pointed tip of her toe barely making contact, her wings keeping her in the air. Her arms were crossed, and that cocky air of hers was just as bad as usual. The purple-eyed fallen angel winked. Oh naive little Issei-kun, if you were to kill us, then we'd be the same. Amused by her own joke, the laughter grew louder, and Issei's scowl deepened. He stepped protectively in front of his maiden. I won't let you put your filthy hands on Asia. Asia peeked around from Issei's side. I want no part of the evil you and the other angels are up to. Ah, you're just as dumb as ever, dragon. She glided over, causing small ripples through the otherwise peaceful water. She kept coming until she and Issei were face to face, less than 2 feet separating them. I don't want to lay my hands on that self-righteous virgin. I'd rather lay them on you, Issei-kun. But that devilish chuckle, she reached a hand towards his cheek. What the hell? Issei wondered, confused and unsure of himself. He wouldn't give up any ground, though, and there was no way he'd ever let that fallen bitch get past him. Rainer pursed her lips, going in for it, but Issei was too shocked to move. Nothing ever made sense. Right before their lips made contact, Rainer brushed his cheek, sending a strange tingle through his body. Instead of what he was expecting, she leaned towards his ear. You should have killed me when you had the chance. He shivered at her tone as rage quickly filled him. He couldn't let her get past him. Angrily, he shot out a hand to block her, but it hit an invisible wall. He banged at the air again, feeling a sharp pain in his knuckles. What did you do to me? He roared, gathering his magic in his hands and trying another punch. Blue covered Issei, and the resulting bang of energy obscured him from view, but it stayed within a rectangular box. When everything cleared, nothing had happened, he was still trapped. I do love watching strong men struggle. Rainer laughed maniacally. Do you feel trapped, hopeless, Issei-kun? Well, it has to do with that paper I placed on your cheek. It's a gift from a friend, and no matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to break out of a mime box. She placed a hand on the invisible wall in front of Issei. Her face seemed just close enough to punch, but his attempt was only met with a sore hand and more laughter. Oh please, the only dragon this couldn't contain is a dragon king, and I've never heard of a dragon king named Issei Haidu. You bastard. I swear if you touch Asia. You'll do what? She interrupted. Die on me. This barrier drains your energy until you wither away to nothing, so I doubt that. The blonde girl yelped, fearful for her friend. Oh, Rainer grinned, putting her hands on her hips as she stood in front of Asia. Don't think you won't be joining him. As soon as I rip your sacred gear out, you'll be able to join your little dragon boyfriend in death. Asia, surprisingly, didn't cower in the face of that statement. I knew it. I knew you were only interested in me for my power. Ah, did you really think I cared for you? Her wicked laughter returned. You're a waste of Twilight Healing's potential. The nun's lips quivered, but she was determined not to show that weakness in front of Rainer. I won't let you have it. She was desperate, Rainer could tell. Just as Asia pushed off to escape, she was grabbed tightly by the arm. Rainer effortlessly had her hand in a tight grip. Poor Issei-kun gets to think about how he let his only friend down, while she screams in pain. Stop it, Rainer. He growled, reaching to his cheek to tear off the paper the fallen had stuck to it. Nothing happened, minus the fallen getting a good kick out of it. Asia struggled, trying to pull herself free of Rainer, but the fallen had inhuman strength, and Asia was only a young nun. She knew she had no chance, not without Issei's help. Accepting her fate, she pleaded, let Issei go, I'll do whatever you want. Are you kidding me? Issei yelled. I'd rather die than see you give in. Rainer rubbed the nun's head in some twisted form of affection. Don't worry, I wouldn't have freedom anyway. He'd screw everything up. Consider this payback for what happened on our date. Payback? He thought. Payback? You bitch. Ha 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 ha, oh I know how you must feel. Did the big, strong dragon find himself outwitted by a pathetic little fallen angel? She giggled, pulling Asia further away from him. I'll leave you to it, then. I'm not going with you. Asia protested, trying to break free as Rainer enveloped herself and the blonde with her midnight black wings. She smirked triumphantly as a magic circle appeared under them. You don't have a choice. Bye now, Issei-kun. The flash of light and a teleport later, he was alone and trapped, his life force slowly being drained. There was enough space for him to sit down and turn his head upwards at sunset. He couldn't help but be reminded of the irony that she had tried to kill him in almost this exact place over a week ago, and now she was finally about to succeed. His hours' worth of efforts, tirelessly slamming into the same place in the barrier, had so far yielded him only a small crack. Despite that, he hadn't made much progress. It turned out that the drain on his magic was minimal at best, and it would take days to kill a dragon like him. Drake was only gone for today, and there was no doubt he could easily find Issei and shatter the mime box like glass. But he just didn't have the time. Asia's life was in danger, and he wasn't strong enough to break through this impossibly solid wall. What made his blood boil was that no one had actually defeated him, and this wasn't even Rainer's own magic. Where was the honor in that? Why was the world so cruel and stupid, he wondered. All he could do now was sit here and remember. Issei ran into the man's room as soon as the doctors said he was in a stable condition. Gildert's. His stubs, remnants of the limbs Acnologia chopped off, were covered in wrapped linens, and the proud mage seemed awfully out of place laying helpless in a bed. The room was full of strange instruments, each attached to Gildert's body in various places. Every now and then, he'd hear a beep from one of the monitors. It was his fault that the deed was reduced to such an existence. "Oh, it's you," the fairy tale ace replied, acknowledging Issei with a grin. "I would have been a goner there if it wasn't for you and that other guy." The teen's eyes were watery, but he knew the tears weren't going to fall. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to." "Kid, it's nothing. Don't worry about something like that." With his one working hand, he ruffled the teen's brown hair, similar to how he found himself treating Natsu. The idea that Gilderts could just say that made Issei furious. "I'm a monster, Gilderts, you were better than them, you didn't deserve to die, but I was still going to kill you." He gazed towards the ground, unable to look the mage in the face. When laughter filled the room, his head shot back up and his eyes grew wide. "Issei, you're anything but a monster. You only tried to do what you had to in order to appease your dad." "My dad?" Though he got the gist of it, he wasn't entirely sure what Gilderts meant. "You care for him, don't you?" Although the young dragon didn't answer, the mage had learned everything he needed to know. "I know he doesn't seem like the caring type, but he told you to do that to help you, as weird as that sounds." "Help me?" When Acnologia had taught him Dragon Slayer magic, that helped. When Acnologia aided him in defeating his first dragon, that was helped. When Acnologia had first found him on that mountain, that was definitely helpful. However, this was anything but help. "But I didn't want to kill you." "I know," the image assured. "He may be a heartless monster to me, but he wants the best for you. In his own way." When Issei didn't seem too convinced, the mage sighed, knowing he'd have to explain the concept further. "I told you earlier that you'd do anything to protect the people you care for, and you are someone that he'd go to great lengths to protect." He flew away. But he did. "If he were here, though, would he let you die?" "Well, no, I guess not." The mage grinned. "Well then, there you go. You're that dragon's loved one, someone he wants to protect. Probably more than he cares about the fate of the world." Issei didn't seem all so gloomy anymore. "Do you think so?" "Yep, kid. I had kind of a harsh father too, never really seeing eye to eye. Took me a while to get that he saw things differently. Eventually, you'll find someone you feel an obligation towards, someone you won't stand to see sad or injured." "What should I do then?" He relaxed, placing his remaining hand behind his head. "That's easy, you gotta do whatever it takes, regardless of the consequences." Regardless of the consequences. He didn't fully understand then, but now it was a far simpler situation. As retribution for taking Asia, he was going to save her and put all those assholes in their place. If he had to, he'd kill Rainer, but his first priority was Asia, and he couldn't hold anything back. Consequences be damned, he was going to break out of this wretched box. He was out of options, and he knew he'd already wasted too much time fruitlessly pounding on the wall. Still, there was an ace in the hole, something up his sleeve that he hadn't used for 2 years. Drake had forbidden it, but the heavenly dragon wasn't here to stop him from saving Asia. "Chaos Dragon Slayer forbidden technique," he muttered aloud, gathering up his energy. As he felt more and more in tune with the magic flowing through his body, he pushed it to the surface. The voices began, whispering in his ear. "It's starting." They were unique to him, Acnologia had never had problems like this. Different, but the same. It is always the same. While he was once covered with blue tattoos, new identical ones were etching themselves across his entire body, leaving nothing uncovered. His skin took on an unearthly glow. The one the world seeks. The one the world rejects. Most of his body was now radiating the blue aura of his energy, filling the entire inside of the barrier. Rocks cracked, bursting from the ground and vaporizing. Has always been power. Has always been love. The voices, he didn't know what they meant. Soon, though, he wouldn't care, not if the chaos consumes him. At 90% of his potential released, the worst physical injury he could suffer from it was exhaustion, but there were things worse than physical damage. Only close to 100% was life-threatening, yet there was always one big danger. He could still lose himself. Every time they chose the path of destruction. His now sky-blue eyes snapped open. Aura burst. With that proclaiming roar, his body pulsed with magic, covering his entire body in an azure cloak before dissolving back into his skin, leaving those newly created markings all over. Very few other mages could release all of their health potential at once, and magic as potent as Issei's made the repercussions severe. Did she really think she could stop me with borrowed magic? While Issei could obtain a risky power boost, Rainer stooped as low as to contain him with another's barrier. That was pathetic, weak. He gathered all of his energy into his hand, changing his arm into that of a dragon's. The light was so intense that the entire box was shrouded by it. Pointing his claws at the barrier, he declared, "Chaos Dragon King's Lance." He jabbed forward. On contact with the invisible wall, cracks formed. As he pumped in more and more magic, the cracks spiderwebbed across the barrier, until crash. It shattered, disintegrated into little bits. The attack wasn't over, though, and the residual energy pulsed, exploding outwards and engulfing a 20-meter radius. Afterwards, Issei was left at the bottom of a crater, completely free and only panting slightly. Another time, he'd have been proud that he didn't use all of his aura in that one attack, but his focus lay on something else. Without hesitation, he went into his hybrid state. He was going to save Asia, no matter what. Energy flowed through Issei, pouring off him in waves. The power pulsing through his body made him let out a small growl of both anticipation and anger. After using Aura Burst, holding this much of his draconic magic was dangerous yet empowering. If he wanted to, he felt like he could walk up to the leader of the fallen angels and blow him to pieces solely for being responsible for the woman that ruined him. TCH, Fallen Angels Reigner. The name was distasteful now, and the mere thought of the sly, tricky fallen made him let out a deeper growl of pure hatred. She will die, he assured himself. For hurting both Asia and him, she would be erased from this world and all others. She doesn't deserve life, not like Gildert's did. Though it was dark outside and Issei's scales were pitch black, it was easy to make out the imposing form of the 8-foot-and-some dragon. The flowing blue tattoo seemed alive, like a river across his body, and the added lines only served to make him more prominent in the darkness. He was a beacon of visible power, but it wasn't like he cared. Stealth was for lesser beings, he was always told. The church stood in front of him, and he couldn't waste any time contemplating. Asia was in danger. He burst through the large doors. As a dragon far larger than any human, he found their height to be laughable, as though they tried to be grand and came up short. That seemed to be a theme with these fallen angels, the arrogance mixed with obvious weakness. Issei didn't understand it. The voice came to him, this time his father's. Arrogance in lesser beings. TCH, if you're strong, prove it. His eyes cut through the darkness like a knife, his sharp gaze scanning every inch of the room. Typically, he'd have some vision problems, but the energy forced to the surface had turned his eyes a light shade of blue, enhancing his sight to perhaps that of a devil. He could easily see the pews, the altar, and all the artwork, no part of the room escaping him. Not even the white-haired man in garb resembling that of a priest. Empty, blazing blue eyes locked with the man's red ones. "Yui," he exclaimed, stepping into the aisle from the pew he was hidden behind. "The Inghel man. That slut said she took care of you, that lying bitch." Issei's unnatural voice thrummed with power and sent shivers down the man's spine, but that only excited the latter more. "You're the stray exorcist, Fried Selzen. The one who hurt Kaneko-chan." Despite the threatening tone, said exorcist cackled madly. "You mean to say you're a friend of that flathead, shitty devil I shot?" He brought a gun and sword hilt from his pocket, bringing the former in front of his face. "I must be the luckiest man alive. Now's my chance to kill a dumbass devilish dragon. Women love dragon slayers, and I love killing things. It's a win-win." He grinned like an insane maniac, running his tongue over his gun. "Disgusting." Issei started walking forward, keeping his pace casual, as if there wasn't about to be a fight. He stretched his wings out over the pews, their enormous eyes making his already large figure more intimidating. Fried cackled madly. "My holy gun of awesomeness is going to blow a hole through those colorful draggy wings." He squeezed the trigger repeatedly, a hail blazing yellow bullets cascading towards the dragon. Each impact made a sizzle, then smoke rose from the points of contact. "What? You bastard, that did nothing." "I'm not a devil, you idiot." He was now only a few meters from the exorcist, arms crossed. "How can someone like you follow the same god as Asia?" "Ha ha 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 ha. You really think I care about that lazy mother in shitty ass heaven? For all I know, that bastard's probably dead. I'm only an exorcist for the delicious fun of shoving my holy sword into devils." He had a button on the hilt and holy light formed in the shape of a sword. The dragon laughed, the sound more akin to a throaty rumble, a terrifying characteristic of his species. Even Fried backed off a little, cursing. Clearly, Issei didn't think Fried was going to be able to harm him any more with the sword than with the bullets. That was a good assumption, considering that the weapons were rather ineffective on supernatural beings that weren't devils. The exorcist sobered up, realizing he was way outmatched. "Damn it. This isn't over, dragon." Running away, Issei muttered as the exorcist started jumping on furniture until he reached the window. "He won't escape from what he's done," the dragon glared, opening his maw. He roared, firing a beam of light at the exorcist, who tried in vain to dodge. The magic clipped his leg and forced him to fall down onto the windowsill, howling in pain as blood coated his mangled limb. "Bing monster." The priest screeched, pulling something out of his pocket. As Issei readied the finishing blow, the exorcist threw something at him. Light exploded out, blinding Issei and obscuring the entire church. When everything died down, the priest had disappeared. Such cowardice. Issei wasn't concerned, however. Fried was worse than trash, not even worth hunting down to kill. Instead, he continued his steady march towards Asia, tracking her scent into a hidden staircase. He didn't bother with opening it, smashing through the floor effortlessly. Stairs descended into a large basement, no doubt the base for the fallen angel's operations. Screaming. There she was. He found Asia, but she was wailing in pain, writhing from her position chained to a cross. Green lines covered the cross behind her, and Rainer was standing next to her, grinning eagerly. The rest of the room was filled with robed exorcists. None seemed as powerful as Freed, and that meant they were barely as strong as an average human. In addition, there were 3 more characters. A man in a grey trench coat and hat, a blonde woman in a schoolgirl outfit, and a blue-haired woman in a violet shirt and miniskirt. More fallen angels. He would eagerly eliminate their kind for the times they had screwed with his life. Issei. Rainer yelled, horror in her eyes. No, this isn't possible. Stop him, now. She panicked, pointing at him. On her whim, all of the exorcists charged, making Issei sigh. Their stupidity and blind obedience would kill them. He spread his wings and held them out until they were glowing vibrantly with a coating of energy. With a roar, he beat them once and caused a gale, his magic empowering the wind and sending the humans flying back. The cutting force of the wind sliced off body parts and blasted the exorcists with enormous force. Chaos Dragon's wingbeat was already one of his favorite attacks, an aura burst made it 10 times more lethal, even when the almost the same amount of energy was used. As each of the exorcists crashed down from the sky, their bodies smashed into the ground in puddles of blood and guts. Mangled corpses and cries of terror now littered the church's basement. A few survived, maybe, but Issei couldn't make himself care in the slightest. The smell of fresh blood filled his nostrils, and he let out a frightening grin. Maybe it was his magic adding to the insanity, maybe he was finally glad he didn't have to hold back his rage. Weaklings. Rainer's mouth was hanging open. Issei wasn't supposed to be this powerful, there was no way that this could have happened. Not only did he kill all of her human subordinates in one half-assed attack, he had broken out of the mime box, something she was assured would contain a dragon of practically any caliber. Issei wasn't a dragon king, so what the hell was he? Issei arrived at the steps before the altar, refusing to stop for any reason. He didn't even bother walking around the blood or dead bodies, crushing them under him instead. Rainer wasn't about to give up yet. All she had to do was get Asia's sacred gear, and she was sure she could find some way to escape. Buy me some time, you 3. The tall woman with blue hair looked back with pure terror in her eyes. No. As she prepared to run away, a large hand grabbed her from behind. The dragon looked at the woman he gripped tightly, able to smell the stench of her cowardice and fear. He wrinkled his nose and ready to punch with the other hand, covering it with magic. The moment he first made contact with her, she exploded, nothing remaining of her whatsoever. Her body was completely overwhelmed by Issei's power. Warm blood spattered his face, making him let out a short growl of discontent. "Hey Calwerner," the man exclaimed, throwing a blue light spear at him. All that did was bounce off uselessly, drawing Issei's haunting blue eyes to his form. Pathetic vermin. As worthless as talking to people like this was, he still did it anyway. Screw what Acnologia thought of it. He reached his hand around the man's throat, crushing his windpipe instantly and tossing him to the side. His limp body bounced a couple of times before landing in a mangled heap. The final of Rainer's 3 extra falls was shaking, a yellow light spear slipping from her grip. The dragon eyes her carefully. She didn't seem to be like the others and wasn't as purely evil. But she had gone along with the plan and was the reason Asia was dying, so she too had to suffer that fate. Nothing could stop him in his bloodlust, not as he stabbed his clawed hand right through the woman's heart, coating his hand in red. He let the body fall to the floor with a thud. It's too late. Despite her confident words, Rainer was backing up. Asia's dead. She was. No, he had come to save her from these worthless weaklings. How could she have died? Her eyes, though, had lost their light and her body was slumped forward, barely supported by the chains tying her to the cross. Rainer, though, was holding the 2 rings of Asia's twilight healing. He understood now. On their date, Issei had called himself pathetic for being so easily deceived, but that couldn't be further than true. She was pathetic, lower than anything else in this world. In fact, she was so weak that she had to manipulate him and Asia just to gain a single power, one that didn't belong to her in the first place. Issei snarled. In this previously timid guy, all Rainer could see now was his pure, unadulterated rage. It made her legs wobbly, and the weight of twilight healing in her hands was suddenly. She almost slipped in her attempt to step backwards, to get away from him. No, there was a way out of here. There was a way that the dragon might spare her. Her breathing irregular, she scrambled back towards the dying blonde. If Asia had her sacred gear back, she would be fine, right? Nervous confidence made her sweat as she placed the rings back on Asia's dot. There was a feeble green glow before the sacred gear was reabsorbed. The nun gasped, her eyes seeming a little more alive, but she was hardly cured. "Is that you, Issei?" "Asia?" For a moment, his voice was back to that of a normal teenager. With his sharp claws, he cut her restraints, and her dying body tumbled into his arms. She smiled weakly. "I'm so glad I got to meet someone like you, Issei." How could she sound so weak after Rainer gave her the sacred gear back? "But I don't deserve your kindness." He had been more focused on killing all those who had harmed her than actually saving her. If he ignored everyone else and went directly to her, he might have been able to stop the ritual in time. That wasn't to mention his past. No. His eyes went wide. "You saved me from my loneliness. I would have loved to have grown up in this country, to have gotten to know you better. Why, you're not going to die." His eyes were watery, a couple tears soaking their way down his cheek. "You still have your sacred gear. Please, I can still save you. Even if I have to sacrifice myself, I can." Asia shook her head. "Keep on living. For me." She rubbed his tears away with a hand before her beautiful eyes closed and her arm hung limply at her side. She couldn't be dead. No. How could she die now? "Asia, there is so much I still wanted to do. Would you go now, Asia? Why couldn't you stay with me?" "That bitch. Rainer. You are a god compared to them." The fallen angel, caught trying to sneak away during the scene, was startled by the roaring proclamation. Issei had a look of pure hatred in those beady light blue eyes. "I'll show you then, that pathetic wench," thinking she could have her way with a dragon and someone he was protecting. "A sliver of my true power." Issei's magic power flared enormously, obliterating everything within 10 feet, the residual power radiating off his body was shaking the church. Rocks fell from the ceiling, covering the only way out, and debris from the collapsing structure undoubtedly killed any of the surviving exorcists. Through it all, though, Asia's slack body was unharmed by any of it. More and more, the structure shook, Issei's magic energy permeating the room like a dense fog. Rubble blocked all the exits, and Rainer was terrified. She had never known what death felt like, but here it was, in the form of unholy retribution. There was no escape, and Issei only seemed to be working himself further and further into a frenzy. Please. I'll be your servant, I'll follow your every command. Issei, please, I never wanted to hurt you. Your date was actually fun, and I'd be happy pledging myself to you for eternity." Issei leaned down until they were face to face. "Lies." It was punctuated with a roar. "Erase everything that hurts." His body glowed with an unearthly navy energy, his height tripling in seconds. In one hand he held Asia, but he grabbed Rainer in the other as he grew enormous, to the true height of a dragon. Rainer screamed and thrashed as his claws tightly gripped her wings, holding her in place as she struggled. Finally, his size and magic were too immense for the church to contain, and the entire building collapsed into a heap of rubble, the dust barely reaching Issei's knees. At 35 meters in height with a thick axe-tipped tail that could slice buildings in half, Issei now appeared as the true epic definition of a dragon. His snout, more angular than his father's round one, held a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, each likely as large as a person. His garb in this form was like Tannen's, and his build was like a bipedal Acnologia, but that was where the similarities ended. Though his colors matched his father perfectly, Auraburst had given him twice the amount of designs, leaving his body better defined as blue with black markings. His, like his father's, was a dull gray and with densely packed muscle. "You're vile, Rainer," Issei scowled, placing Asia's body away from the two of them. Somehow, he had managed to keep a hold on both of them, and he wasn't going to let Asia's body get stuck in that collapsed church. She deserved more than that. "How weak you must be to steal what belongs to someone else. Learn how different we are." He held Rainer by pinching her body with two claws, not caring that he was drawing blood. The crimson liquid flowed down her body, dripping all the way down to the ground. Rainer, completely defeated, didn't even make an attempt to fly away. Issei's already crushed her wing anyway, so she was no more than a helpless bird, staring death in the face. Then, the dragon took an enormous breath, his puffing out as the air was ed into his maw like a vacuum. For almost 30 these seconds, Issei drew in the latent magic energy and disorder of the word, feeling it empower him, filling his reservoirs beyond capacity. "Die now," he commanded. Chaos Dragon's godly roar. There was a moment where all Rainer could focus on was the immense light beyond Issei's open maw. There was no time to consider the fact that he had released that energy, and the effects were instantaneous. The fallen angel knew death was coming, but she couldn't feel it creep up, nor did she experience a second of pain. All she felt was hopeless as a blinding, brilliant light bathed her in its warm glow. Groa. She closed her eyes and accepted her fate, while Issei's insanely loud roar tore through the entire town. Uan. The beam impacted the ground and radiated outwards, ripping up the earth with little effort. It tore deeper, destroying more and more, until the church and Rainer were both no more than a vaporized bunch of particles. Soon, not even the dust of the surrounding grounds remained. Everything was gone, eradicated from existence. All but a single blonde girl, whose body was resting peacefully in his other hand, protected by the resilient body of the giant dragon. After 10 seconds, the roar finally died down, leaving Issei unsteady with his lack of power. Aura burst had finally begun to take its physical toll, the extra lines receding, until he was left with the default markings. His eyes lost their mystical blue fire, a plain white color returning. As his steadiness faltered, his wings and tail tried desperately to balance him, and his mind focused entirely on keeping him upright. Soon, though, his eyes closed, and his exhaustion was taking over. Releasing all of his magic in order to obtain a level that defied logic held a tragic price. He wouldn't die, but he felt so weak at that moment. So helpless, despite being in his full dragon form. Carefully, he lay himself and Asia on the ground, keeping her body in front of his eye as he blinked repeatedly. I wish someone could have saved you. Wait, wish. Riaz was a devil, she could save Asia. Please, but you, I know I haven't been nice to you recently. I lost myself just now, but I need Asia. I don't want to turn evil, Riaz, so please, hear my wish and save her. To add to that, he sent the last of his unused magic as a message. He tried to say it out loud, but all he managed was a tired groan. Hopefully, she would have noticed the destruction and come anyway. He was sure she'd help him. She had to because she was his friend. As his eyes closed to take a long rest, he spotted a red magic circle. Thank you, Butchu. With a small smile on his face, he drifted into unconsciousness. Elsewhere, in the far reaches of the underworld, a black dragon rested atop a mountain. Something, perhaps a shift in the wind, roused the great beast. A pearly wide eye opened, gazing off into the distance. The magic he had felt was unforgettable. By now, though, it had dimmed and faded, undetectable from a great distance. So, you have stopped hiding from yourself, the dragon observed. Is something the matter, Lord Acnologia? He turned his intimidating gaze to the small yellow dragon, whose squeaky, petulant voice had interrupted his thoughts. It was nothing. The pitter-patter of rain drowned out all sounds. All but the roaring, intermittent clap of thunder. Clouds obscured as far as the eye could see, lit up by streaks of lightning flashing towards the ground. On the ground, Issei lay sprawled out in full dragon form, covered in dirt and blood. For all of the rain washing the red liquid off his scales, he still felt dirty and disgusting. A shadow appeared behind the clouds, the figure illuminated by the lightning. With a loud roar, the figure broke through the clouds. The round snout and 4 rear-facing plate-like horns on the dragon's head easily distinguished it. Father? Issei tried to ask, but no sound came out. The behemoth landed next to him, shattering earth and shaking the ground like an earthquake. Issei, he growled out. You know who you are. You aren't some fool lumbering about the human world, tagging along with a bunch of weak devils. Acnologia leaned his snout closer, only feet from Issei's head. You are my son. Issei shot awake, sweat dripping from his forehead. He blinked a couple times, taking in the room and examining his hands. When did he get here? Last he remembered, he was at the church. Now, he was at home in his bedroom, resting. Then, it flooded back to him. Asia. His stomach tightened in anguish, and he felt tears begin to form in his eyes. Damn it, how could he have shown up only seconds too late? It wasn't fair, not at all. Issei? No, Asia. He turned his head, seeing the blonde standing over his bed. Asia. He embraced her in a hug, pulling her close. Ah, Issei. She exclaimed, surprised. Laying back down, he wiped the water from his eyes. I thought I'd lost you. Riaz reincarnated you then. She shook her head, smiling. You were the one who saved me, Issei. I'm so happy you found me in time. I was really tired, but I got better in a few hours with Ria's help. Oh. So all that anger he felt was for nothing. No, Rainer laid her filthy hands on something that was his, so she deserved everything she got. None of the humans or fallen angels there deserve anything less than their fate. I must have scared you, huh? Of course not, you could never scare me. Asia shook her head. You protected me, and I'm glad. I wasn't ready to meet God yet, not as long as I had a friend. As naive as that was, it was sweet. She was able to look past all the evil in his heart, and that was why he was so protective of her. Not even Drake could ignore his past. Ria-san told me what she thought happened to Rainer. He smiled. Don't worry, she isn't around to hurt you anymore. Yes, Asia replied, knowing the implications. Well, it was hard for her to accept, she understood why Issei did it. Perhaps there were those too far gone for forgiveness. Ria-san asked me if I'd like to become a devil. She did what Issei growled, trying to sit up. Ah, please don't get up yet, she insisted, pushing him back down. You're still recovering. I'm sorry, my sacred gear is more suited to healing physical wounds. Issei sighed, hating how weak he felt at the moment. He was healthy enough to stand up, that's for sure, but not by much. He probably needed another day. Why did Riaz ask that? Asia was quick to reassure him. It's okay, I wasn't offended by the offer. She seems nice for a devil. Right, in Asia's past, she had healed a devil. Is that why she was bothering to consider the offer, even though it obviously brought up bad memories? I've already fallen far enough. Only then did Issei realize something he had to come to terms with. Asia wasn't his. Though he may think of her as a little sister, she had the right to do whatever she wanted. Who was he to deny her? Friends supported each other, Gilderts had told him. Also on the plus side, Riaz could give Asia some measure of safety, something he probably couldn't provide, no matter how much he thought so. Dragons were said to draw attention from both the best and worst of people. Enough so that even Drake was hesitant about revealing himself. If that is what you want. But there's no coming back from a decision like that. Asia looked down. I know. It gives me a place to belong again. It's nice being your friend and I'm glad I met you, but I'm not a dragon. As long as it's your decision, I'll make sure Riaz treats you properly. You'll never have to worry about the church or anyone taking advantage of your healing then. He gave her a weak thumbs up, optimistic about the future. Thank you, Issei, she smiled, giving him another hug. He could hear footsteps and conversation from outside the room. He recognized the two voices immediately as Drake and Riaz. Oh man, there was no way his uncle was going to be happy. None at all. Drake hated the existence of Aura Burst and all magics related to it, though his reasons puzzled Issei. At least Riaz would probably be glad he was alright. The door swung open. Issei. Riaz exclaimed. Partner, Drake said dangerously, letting the teen know just how pissed he was. Are you okay, Ice? Riaz questioned, taking a seat on his bed near the standing Asia. Asia told me what happened with the mime box and how you rescued her. Drake remained silent as the devil talked. Issei glanced away from them. I destroyed them all. He was still ambivalent about that fact. While a part of him wished he'd been more merciful, he wasn't raised to show any weakness. Besides, it wasn't like they were good people with many redeeming qualities. I know. When I arrived, I saw you laying over the rubble. If I might add, your dragon form is every bit as impressive as I expected. Damn, she must have known he had a soft spot for praise like that. Thanks. You ask Asia if she wanted to be a devil. Riaz crossed her arms. You care for her a great deal, don't you? Was she jealous? I have the right to ask her that. As a sister, she lost everything, and I was offering a new lease on life. As long as it's her decision, Issei stated, a warning in the undertone. Drake coughed. This is touching, but I need a few words with Issei. In private. He must really have been upset to use Issei's name, rather than calling him partner. Of course Red-san, Riaz deferred, standing up and exiting. Asia waved. See you soon, Issei. The door shut behind them. The hell were you thinking? Drake growled, irate. Issei shuddered. His uncle was a force to be reckoned with when angered, which was honestly an extremely rare occasion. I was trapped in a barrier that I couldn't break through. I hid it for hours and nothing happened. So you do what? Use that move. Well, it was draining my magic, so I had to do something. He'd have died eventually otherwise. The Welsh dragon crossed his arms. You know as well as I do that it would take a day or two to drain your stored Ethernano. It was much harder for him to get Ethernano poisoning than a typical mage. Part of it was because his body had been altered to better accept Ethernano in the first place, while the other was due to being made a dragon. I had to save Asia. The red dragon slammed a fist on the bed, then sighed. I know you want to care for someone, I get it. Nearly driving yourself mad in the process isn't how you do it. But I'm fine, Issei protested. There's a reason it was forbidden, partner. You aren't like the dragons in this world, your life force is based directly on your magic. Dragons here tended to have magic independent of their strength and innate power. In Earthland, however, magic was a dragon's power, minus physical strength. That went doubly so for a mage, and he was both. If you use all of that, you die. Issei didn't get it. I only used 90%. He was certain that 10% of his residual magic was more than enough to live on, even if it caused a day of exhaustion. Greg looked at him seriously. Issei, the teen looked up, that isn't all. I was trapped inside the boosted gear for a long time, remember? He nodded, unwilling to point out that he already knew that. He didn't want to reignite his uncle's anger. In truth, I wasn't the only being sealed within your left arm. What do you mean? He was just hearing about this now. The voices you hear. I didn't want to tell you, but they are the voices of the past predecessors that, unlike me, stayed trapped within you instead of leaving your body. Your father only purged dragon magic when he made you a dragon slayer, it seems. Issei ran his hands through his hair. Really? Greg sat on the foot of the bed, nodding. Normally, the voices would make themselves known during the chant for Juggernaut Drive. But instead of that, they choose the moment when you draw on the energy within yourself. The rage you feel when you overuse your magic, your father never had that problem. That was those sealed former boosted gear wielders affecting your mind. During Aura Burst, you have much more magic flowing through you. How can I become a Dragon King without using that? His uncle actually laughed. Partner, as bad as it is to say, you're more like your father than you think. There's more to life than just training and power. You're 17 for great red's sake, and most Dragon Kings took hundreds of years to train themselves to your level. Yeah, Issei replied sourly. Luckily, my father had other methods. It disgusted him. He preferred not to remember what Acnologia had convinced him to do. It was unsettling, and he felt sick at what he'd done. The dragon wasn't abusive, far from it, but that didn't mean Issei appreciated how he gained power. Forget about what you've done, and don't worry so much about the future. Tag along with Rias and her gang and meet new people. Maybe get a mate, something I never bothered to do myself. I'm no Gildarts, but that's my advice. Take it or leave it. His tone was final, unwavering. This was a decision he wanted Issei to make now. The teen nodded. I get it. Good, the older dragon said. Rest here. I'm going to let Rias and Asia in while I have some business to take care of. He patted his nephew's leg before standing up and striding towards the door. Business? You never tell me any of it, Issei complains childishly, eliciting a chuckle from Drag. The Welsh dragon stopped and turned around, letting out a small sigh. I suppose you deserve the answer. Remember that buddy I had that provided us with the house and money? He's the one I go to see all this time, and it has to do with a particularly special gift for you. Oh, right, wasn't Drake planning on getting him some kind of awesome present? The man who helped me with it, the one I've been seeing all this time, is Azazel, the Governor General of the Grigori. Grigori? Issei exclaimed, shocked. But they were the ones who. Breg held up a hand. No, they weren't. The fallen angels who were responsible for what has happened over the last few days had ignored their superiors' orders. Issei wasn't convinced. Trust me on this, you don't have the experience in this world that I do. Okay, if you trusted him with your secret, his uncle was right. Drake was far more knowledgeable about this world as compared with Issei's and Acnologia's upbringings in Earthland. Breg seemed relieved. I really must go. Azazel needs my help with a project. As his uncle opened the door to leave, Issei had decided. I'll do it. If Asia does become a member of their group, I will follow them around. The dragon was proud. You've grown, Issei, he said, closing the door behind him. For a couple seconds, he was left alone with his thoughts. Specifically, how far he had come in the past few years. Drake was right, he had grown significantly. From murdering dragons left and right to fitting in with the Kendo Club. Now, he even had a close friend and a group of devils who respected and accepted him for who and what he was. Still, a part of him wanted to be back with his father and Drake, the three living together on Zonia Mountain. Your uncle lightens your mood, a familiar voice observed, amused. Rias was standing by his bedside with Asia, the former having a large smirk. You're the first dragon I've gotten to know, Ice, she revealed. It's strange to think of you as the dragon I saw yesterday when I look at you now. Issei rubbed the back of his head. I've spent the past couple years around humans. I guess I've got a convincing disguise. He was a dragon, not a human. He had to remember that. That's one way to put it. Wait a second. Issei realized something suddenly. How did I end up back in human form? The devil laughed at her carelessness. I'm sorry. Your uncle had rushed me out of the room before I got the chance to fill you in on what happened. She calmed down, beginning the recount. When I found you in Asia, both of you were passed out but alive. The destruction you had caused was very profound, and the hill the church was set on is completely gone. Brad arrived later, saying he was your uncle. He was very agitated at the time. I have to say, I'm not entirely sure how he turned you back, but he told me it was related to one of his abilities. That was strange. Could Drake use transfer on someone else to change the amount or type of their power? He carried you back here, walking the entire distance. Issei hated that Drake was so against revealing who he was. It was quite endearing to see how much he cared for his family members. The brown-haired teen didn't miss the undertone there. Asia nodded. Ria-san took me back to your house as well. Red-san treated me kindly when I woke up, and he even cooked some food. You let him cook? Issei exclaimed, horrified. The girls nodded. It was, Ria sighed before continuing, unfortunate. He's even worse than I am at making human food, the dragon muttered. Asia frowned. I thought it was nice of him. Yes, well, Issei replied, he caught himself. Red would never turn down helping two beautiful girls in need. Especially if you helped me out. He blushed a little, but was able to shrug it off. Oh Ice, Ray smirked, you never cease to amaze me. She looked off into the distance, a look of unease and doubt on her features. Issei couldn't help but wonder what would make her feel so distraught and distant that she would lose her confident air. Are you okay? She seemed startled before chuckling a bit. I apologize for that. I've a lot to deal with these days and often find myself wondering how things could have been. Her amusement left her eyes. It is nothing of importance to you. She just wished she could have been stronger or that she was as powerful and independent as Issei. The freedom that dragons had was absolutely nothing short of incredible. Rias almost signed, focusing back in on the discussion at hand. Regardless of that, Ice. He glanced towards her. You said you wouldn't try to prevent me from reincarnating Asia as a devil. Yes, the dragon replied. At least Rias and Asia told him about the offer. He would have felt blindsided otherwise, and the Grimoire didn't want to anger him anymore, especially after the destruction of the church. I won't stop you. She crossed her arms casually. I know it must seem quite selfish of me to ask her such a thing, and I won't claim it isn't. At least she was being honest. Issei abhorred lies, doubly so because of all that had happened. I will admit that my peerage is in desperate need of a healer, and Asia, your twilight healing is a top-tier healing sacred gear. That isn't to say there aren't benefits for you as well, of course. Issei thought for a couple seconds. He had already decided that he didn't hold enough claim over Asia to prevent her from making a choice like this that could so greatly impact her future. As a human nun, Asia would also have a shorter lifespan, and he would be forced to watch his first real friend wither away and die. If that happened, he shuddered to think of what he would feel. As long as your peerage is capable of protecting her, I won't object. Really? Rias replied, both stunned and pleased that Issei had relented so easily. From what she knew of the dragon, he would never let anything that was his go without a fight, and he was determined to fight till the end. The Grimoire territory in the underworld is one of the safest places I know of. I can't promise anything, however. As devils, we will get into battles, such as that stray devil we hunted earlier. Asia would be my bishop, a support piece, so she would be relatively safe from such things. I don't mind that, Asia interjected. If you choose this, you'll lose your connection to God, Rias warned. Asia shook her head, a smile on her face. No matter what or who I am, God will be with me. Even if I cannot pray aloud, he will hear. Issei felt so guilty for letting her believe that God was still alive. Iridide seemed impressed by her devotion. It sounds like you have chosen. Yes, Asia replied with a short bow. I accept your offer. You will need a place to stay. With me, Issei interrupted. She stays here. I'm sure my uncle won't mind the company. Well then, Rias began, it settled. Asia seemed flustered. She blushed a deep crimson, practically the same shade as Ria's hair. It sounds silly, but can you allow me one last time to pray? The club president nodded. Of course. The nun wasted no time before she placed her palms together and closed her eyes. The two watched on as Asia's expression showed a sensation of pure serenity and contentment. For nearly 30 seconds, she remained in that position, hardly moving, sometimes mouthing words. After that, she murmured, Amen. She opened her eyes and grinned brightly, her pleasant cheer lighting the room. She stuck her tongue out in a silly gesture. All done. Rias reached into her pocket and brought out a blood-red chess piece. This is a bishop, she began to explain. Like chess, each of the evil piece types, bishop, pawn, knight, rook, and queen holds different abilities. The bishop will increase your magical power and grant you the other abilities of a devil. Increase their magic power. Issei would love something that did that without requiring him to become a devil. Sadly, life didn't work that way. Could you lie down on the foot of Ice's bed? I'm sure he would like to see this. Oh okay. Asia replied energetically. Rias placed the bishop over Asia's as the blonde shut her eyes. The devil's body was surrounded by her crimson demonic power, the room feeling much smaller all of a sudden. I, Rias Grimoire, in the name of the House of Grimoire, order you, Asia Argento, to be resurrected as my devil servant. May you rise again, delighted with your new life as my bishop. The piece glowed with an unearthly light as it sunk into Asia's body. Still, she remained peaceful throughout the ritual. Ria's body lost its powerful glow, and she returned to normal, not even curious about the outcome of the ritual. It obviously worked. Issei quirked his head. This was all. He went through 2 years of hard work and violent actions to become a dragon, and all it took Asia to become a devil was a couple seconds. That was kind of lame. How do you feel? Asia opened her eyes. Oh, is it over already? It seemed she was expecting more as well. I don't know. Rias put her signature amused look on. You won't feel too different. In a day or so, you will notice your energy increases at night, and you will also experience pain when touching any holy object you're praying. Devils also have stronger bodies than humans and the ability to fly. Fly? She thought back, remembering her time with Issei. Issei shook his head. Devils can't fly like a dragon. It's still pretty cool though. Asia nodded, a little let down. I won't regret this decision, Ria-san. When school kicked back up again, Asia was unveiled as the new student. She bowed politely in front of the class. My name is Asia Argento. I'm feeling a bit like a fish out of water, but I'm excited to be here, she ended with a smile. Whoa. The class cheered. Mitsuda pumped a fish. Damn, she's hot. Motohama was quick to add, her measurements are 24 to 36-35, and look at all that hair. Issei welcomed the positive reception, though he'd have to tell those perverts off later. Rias must have pulled some strings to get her in my class. The blonde tried to stay composed in front of everyone. Being a new town can be overwhelming, but luckily I'm staying with Issei. Why does he get all the girls? Mitsuda raged. What does that bastard have that I don't? The second member of their duo shouted. Addis and Murayama, meanwhile, grinned. I wonder if they're a pair. The former wondered. Murayama giggled quietly. Oh, that would be adorable. I never knew Issei was so interested in blondes. But Issei's enhanced hearing, figuring out what the two were mumbling about wasn't a challenge at all. He stood up immediately and pointed accusingly at his kendo club captains, yelling, damn it you two, we aren't together. That means she's open? A hopeful Mitsuda asked, jumping up. Hell yeah. Motohama adjusted his glasses with a grin. Finally, a chance for us. Issei growled under his breath as more and more of the guys declared their undying love for the new arrival. Damn, he knew none of them would get anywhere, but it was still annoying. None of them were good enough for her, and they all just liked her for her pretty looks. Whatever, it was just high school. He sighed and sat back down, placing his head in his hands. Following her first day, Asia was inducted to the Occult Research Club, where she got to meet the other members. As with a typical low-class devil, Asia began her tasks by handing out flyers and leaflets to people who might summon one of the peerages. Issei tagged along more often than not, worried that there might still be fallen angels in the area who were after her. Soon, though, he realized he was being worse than Drake and toned it down, going back to meetings with the Kendo Club instead. It was a couple days later, back in the old school building, when Rias made an announcement to Asia and Issei. I think you're ready for the next step. Wait, Rias thought Asia was done handing out flyers. Next step? Do you mean she's going to try to get a contract? Yes, if that's alright with you, Asia, I was thinking you could make your big debut tonight. Asia was still a step behind, puzzled. A contract? Ah, it seems Ice didn't explain to you how devils gain power. Rias crossed her legs, still sitting in her large clubroom chair. Aside from training, devils can increase their ability and rise through the ranks by completing contracts. You only have to fulfill a client's wish, and you seem plenty kind-hearted enough to help out. The blonde nodded. That doesn't sound too bad. But what if the clients want something perverted? Issei shot back worriedly. Rias sighed, then the corners of her mouth twinged upwards in amusement. Oh Ice. I have faith that Asia is capable of this, you should too. She is my servant after all, and she is under my protection. He couldn't help but remember the strange scene he walked in on a week ago, after the incident with Freed. Some protection you gave Kaneko-chan, Issei muttered. The redeed fixed Issei with a rather upset glare. Don't think you're the only one who feels that way. I won't allow anyone to harm my servants. I say, I'll do it. Huh, Asia? The blonde smiled confidently. It was up to me to choose my future, and I wanted this. Well, if Asia wanted to prove herself so badly, who was he to argue? She was right, it was up to her. I'm sorry but you. I didn't mean that. Rias walked over and wrapped him in her warm embrace. I know. You're just looking out for Asia. Releasing the hug, Rias sat back down. Now then, Asia, Akeno will help you get ready to make the jump. I'm sure she'll be fine. The two of them turned around to see Akeno waving at them. She's packing almost as much magic power as I am. Wait, everyone was watching the previous scene. Even when Rias hugged him. He felt his face growing warm with embarrassment. Rias smirked. I didn't make her my bishop for nothing. Congrats, by the way, Kiba added, the bishop is impressive. So, are you ready for Asia? The girl nodded. Okay then, remember to have fun and get a contract signed. The former nun waved. I say. She said as she stepped in the magic circle and her body dissolved into red. Though everyone else had the utmost confidence in Asia, and Issei knew she could take care of herself to some extent, he couldn't get rid of the sinking feeling in his gut. Asia got the contract. Issei had breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that it was going to be tough to forget about how helpless she looked nailed on that cross. It seemed that anyone with aspirations to acquire Twilight healing had backed off when Rias made her a bishop, which was a helpful benefit. Surely, Issei reasoned, someone out there had the same goal as Rainer and would use an innocent like Asia to achieve it. It made his blood boil that people would try to steal another's power. The next day at the club, he was far more accepting of Asia acting as Ria's servant rather than someone with only connections to the peerage like him. Today, while they were meeting with Rias, Issei checked to make sure that the rest of the club members weren't going to burst in and see anything. I'm quite proud of you, Asia. You too, Ice. Me? What the hell did she mean by that? I know Asia got that pact, but me? Ria smirked. I can't imagine it was easy for you to let go of your maiden. Dragons are fond of them after all. Was that really why Issei had felt so protective of her? I never would have thought that such a stereotype was true, but now, maybe it is a thing. He would have to ask Drag. The irritated king rolled her eyes at how thoughtful and zoned out Issei was. Now then, Asia, since you are capable of signing a contract, you have officially graduated from handing out flyers. Normally the hassle of running around and passing them out is the job of a familiar. Familiar, the dragon thought aloud. In Fiori, they certainly existed, but very few mages had one. You mean you guys have familiars here too? Orias wasn't too certain what he meant exactly, she answered affirmatively. Most devils have one, yes, and magicians are also prone to contracting familiars. Issei hummed. That was kind of cool. He thought he would have to hang around and protect Asia in case there was trouble, but if he found a strong familiar, then he wouldn't need to worry as much. That's awesome, Asia. You're getting a promotion. I suppose you could look at it that way, Ria said. But first things first, let's get you a familiar. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the DragonKingNatsu for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.